President Muhammadu Buhari has broken his silence on the ongoing investigation of the acting chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, Ibrahim Magu. In a statement by Garba Shehu, his senior special assistant on media and publicity, he said, "The war against corruption is not a static event, but a continuous process that requires transparency and accountability, where people must be held to account for their activities so as to improve Nigeria's democratic institutions. Those who see Mr. Magu's investigation as a signal that the fight against corruption is failing have unfortunately missed the boat. There is no better indication that the fight is real and active than the will to investigate allegations in an open and transparent manner against those who have been charged to be custodians of this very system." Those were words from the president. Well, here to speak on this or more is lecturer and public affairs analyst Dr. Sunday Adejho. Dr. Sunday, a very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. If we were to start right where we begin with Ibrahim Magu's accusation and the allegations against him, it is concerning to say the least that the chief anti-corruption officer has been accused of corruption himself. Does this mean that Nigeria and corruption will continue to be hand in hand?
Well, that's a very critical issue that individuals and organizations established to fight corruption themselves are gradually being indicted in issues that has to do with corruption. But you see, to discuss this whole issue, it would be better to situate it within the context of the trajectories of the Economic and Financial Crime Commission in terms of the series of, chairmen who have headed, the EFCC. None of the people who headed the EFCC have ended well. Right from the time of Nuhu Ribadu, then to Waziri, then to Lamurde, and of course currently Ibrahim Magu, nobody has headed the EFCC and ended up successfully without being sacked or without being demoted or without being accused of the same, corruption that they are meant to be fighting. But it gives us a situation of a gloomy hope as far as the fight against corruption is concerned. He that comes to equity must come to equity with clean hands. And so if you have somebody who is at the helm of fighting corruption, especially knowing that corruption is one of the most critical agenda of the current administration, then we cannot afford to have somebody at the helm of affairs who has all manner of allegations as far as corruption, is concerned. But I want to also say that the executive arm of government, especially the presidency, has a fair share in the blame as far as what is transpiring, in the EFCC. If you take a look at the emergence of Magu, we'll understand that the background check that was done by the Department of State Security Service indicted Magu, and of course the Senate, on the merit of that report by the DSS, said Magu was not the right person to head this office. But the presidency went ahead to put Magu there. With all the controversies, the presidency insisted that Magu must be there. And today you can see the result of insisting, the result of ensuring that the principles of rule of law is not adhered to, the result of ensuring that the principles of checks and balances and separation of power is not adhered to. This is the kind of result that you are bound to get. And I'm not surprised, I'm not surprised at all. When the whole saga between Magu and the National Assembly was playing out, some persons saw it as, corruption, fighting back. But I do not think that is the case. There's already a report from one of the most intelligent agencies of government saying that this person is not good for the job, and whether or not corruption is fighting back is not the issue. The issue is that Magu had reports that was indicting, and of such, the presidency was not supposed to have given him that position in the first instance. Nigerians will be losing hope. It's an embarrassment on the image of this country that the most renowned, anti-graft agency is also being roped into the whole issue of corruption. For me, it's like the hunter becoming the hunted, or in local parlance, if you like, the bushmeat has become the hunter, and the hunter now the bushmeat.
I couldn't agree more. It's quite interesting because in light of all the allegations from the EFCC we've seen of late, it's a bit ironic to have Ibrahim Magu sitting on the hot seat. However, what does this tell us about the leadership structure we have in Nigeria? You know, the fact that the Nigerian Senate turned this man down twice, his request for confirmation. The DSS brought allegations against him in 2016. Yet we saw all of this, and for some reason, he still came back on top, only for him to be pulled down now. I think this is something we see a lot with regards to how leaders are appointed and the nature of leaders that we do have within Nigeria. So while you ponder on that, we are going to be taking a short break very soon, and then you can obviously answer that when we get back to the morning show. Stay with us. You're welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. We still have lecturer and public affairs analyst Dr. Sunday Adejho. Now, Dr. Sunday, before we went to that quick break, I was asking what, the entire, looking at this on from a bigger perspective, what this says of the structure of our leadership. This is a man, I'm speaking about, Ibrahim Magu. This is a man whose, confirmation was rejected twice. This is a man who the DSS brought allegations against in 2016. His record wasn't particularly the cleanest, you understand? And then we've seen this happen with a few other leaders. December 2019, we had Adejho Okalu sentenced to 12 years in prison. Wow. 6 months after he's back in the Senate. It's like we start this thing out, it's heated up for a while, and then it just disappears. So it's like we keep doing the same thing over and over again. So in your opinion, what does this say of the structure of our leadership in Nigeria?
You see, I think one of the serious challenges we have is leadership, and of course the structure of leadership vis-a-vis the political behavior of those who manage the affairs of the state. The state itself is made up of those who personifies the state, those who handle, political positions or public offices and help to manage our commonwealth. But the question is, how well do they manage our commonwealth? How well and how far do they put national interest before their selfish interest? What you have today as exemplified in Nigeria is a typical example where the political class are more interested in their selfish interests than in their national interests. They are more interested in their individual intention than the general good of the populace. And that is why you begin to have issues, of political rascality. We have issues of people occupying positions that they do not have the competence to occupy. But because such positions, are given to people on political compensation grounds, and we cannot progress as a country if we continue to tread in this light. This is not just peculiar to the executive arm of government. We have similar situation playing out both in the legislature and even in the judicial, even within the judicial system. And until we begin to change our mentality, change our attitude towards governance, understand that governance is about service to the people, understand that governance is not a business of a few set of persons using
Wait, it sounds like we might have lost connection to Dr. Sunday Adejho just then. In the meantime, Kachi and I will continue to talk about corruption and how serious this situation is. And I love that you asked him that, because we talk about us wanting to stamp out corruption. That was definitely part of President Muhammadu's manifesto when he wanted to become president, but it just seems as though there isn't always the following through.
It's like the rule of law is negotiable in Nigeria, which is ridiculous. Let's go back to Dr. Sunday Adejho there to hear what you were saying.
Hi, Dr. Sunday. I don't know if you wanted to continue landing on your point before we ask you another question.
Okay.
Please do go ahead.
Okay, so I said the problem we have in Nigeria and in most African countries is the fact that people who occupy political positions are not interested in delivering the dividends of good governance to the people, and so they are just interested in promoting their own, their own selfish interests. And that is why somebody like Karl Marx will say that the state is the executive committee of the bourgeoisie who use the instrumentality of governance to promote their own personal interests. If we have the country at heart, if we have our national interests and we put national interests before individual interest, we wouldn't have such situation. What we have is a situation where the political class insists on having their way against all odds. They insist on putting round pegs in square holes because these squares or these pegs are their political cronies or they are affiliated or they are members of the same political party and all of that. And that is why we are not making progress. For God's sake, if somebody like Magu will be rejected twice by the Senate, on what ground should the presidency insist that Magu must be imposed on Nigerians as, as the chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission? This is not just about Magu. There are several political appointments of this present administration that Nigerians have come out to criticize. Yet the presidency will insist on them and nothing will be done because it is the interest of those who occupy political position that is more important rather than the interests of the general populace. And until we begin to change our notion of governance and our notion of leadership, that leadership is about the interests and the desires of the people, not the interests of those who occupy political class, we will continue to remain where we are. We need an attitudinal change. We need a functional, institutional framework that will ensure that we get some degree of efficiency and effectiveness as far as the delivering of good governance is concerned. Until we do that, I do not see us changing. We must give room for competence. We must give room for competition. We must give room for give room for equal level playing ground for people to come and express their interests. And of course, we pick people who have the competence and the wherewithal to ensure that we move forward as a country.
Absolutely. Well, if we take a closer look at these allegations, they seem to center on a missing 550 billion naira amount, monies that were accrued from some types of interest rates accrued over a 5-year period between 2015 to 2020. This is obviously a huge amount of money. How much faith do you have in this process? Because as it stands, of course, he's been accused and he's currently being interrogated at the presidential villa. But how much faith do you have that due process will prevail in this case?
Well, if the statement of Garba who is anything to go by, that there is nobody, as far as the issue of corruption is concerned, there is nobody that is above the law, then it means that we have some degree of hope. But with this level of accusation, not just coming from anybody, but coming from, the Minister of Justice and an Attorney General of the Federation, then it means that we will not expect that the presidency should handle this matter, likely. But of course, we already heard that there's already a replacement for Magu. That already gives us an idea that his regime or his tenure in the EFCC has come to an end. And of course, that's the right step in the right direction. But we must ensure that the law take its course, and whatever approach that is used in the whole investigation and all of that must also adhere to the principles of rule of law. It is one thing to ensure that people who are accused and are found guilty are prosecuted. It's another thing to ensure that the process is done within the context and confines of the principles of rule of law. However, I know some persons will say that Magu is getting a fair share of the same bitter pill that he has given to a lot of people. But that notwithstanding, two wrongs cannot make a right. Yes, the investigation is going on. Yes, he has been detained for several number of days. Is this detention in line with the principles of habeas corpus? What is the jus ad bellum for detaining him for such a number of days? Do we have the moral justification to continue to detain him without, of course, initiating a judicial process and all of that? These are critical issues that we must also look into. It is one thing to get the things done, but we must also ensure that we do that in line with the principles of rule of law.
I think this is such a huge irony because we're speaking about, whether there are legal grounds or, legal grounds on holding him this long without investigation. But do we have any idea how many Nigerians have been held by the EFCC for days, months in some cases, just held on siege and, without any judicial proceeding?
Exactly.
So I think it's just completely interesting because now you can actually feel what a lot of people feel. It's a crazy one. Speaking about what she said with regards to how we handle these situations, let's talk about what's going on in Ondo State shortly. You know, the deputy speaker coming out to say that his suspension is completely illegal, unconstitutional. He says it's a type of vexation. We're going to dwell on that a little, and also bringing the impeachment process for the deputy governor and as to how exactly this stands with regards to the upcoming primaries. We'll be right back shortly. Again, we'll be back with some more on this topic. Stay with us. You're welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. We still have with us lecturer and public affairs analyst Dr. Sunday Adejho. Now, Dr. Sunday, in section 188 of the Constitution, it says that for an impeachment to happen, a two-third population is needed for the impeachment of a deputy governor. That is within, you know, the Ondo State's primaries that we're looking forward to shortly. Now, the deputy speaker has come out to say that he is not in support of this impeachment. He feels like it's just a vexation. It's a personal agreement, and he's not going to stand for it. Him and a few other people, about 9 of them. Now, he has been suspended. So he is coming out to tell us that, listen, as long as we don't have this full number, which is about 18 people, if you're looking at the 26 involved, as long as we don't have this two-thirds, the impeachment cannot happen. But why am I being suspended? Why is this happening? They can't tell me not to go into my office. The crisis in Ondo State is brewing. What are your thoughts on, you know, this particular situation?
Well, the crisis in Ondo State is a typical example of what has characterized the political system of Nigeria. What is happening in Ondo State is a clear manifestation of executive and legislative rascality, where people, like I said a while ago, the political class are more interested in driving their own individual selfish interests rather than the collective interests of the people that they have vowed or they have taken oaths to come and serve. It doesn't depict, you know, a situation where people have the degree of credibility that they should have before occupying political positions. For heaven's sake, the governor and the deputy governors were members of the same political party ab initio. And the deputy governor is saying that I want to go and I want to contest for governor under a different platform. And what the governor will do is to attempt an impeachment process because the governor himself knows that he cannot sack the deputy governor. And so he recourse to the state assembly to use as a strategy, you know, to ensure that the deputy governor is impeached. Remember, before this whole impeachment process started, a member of the State House of Assembly had come out to say if the deputy governor does not return back to, you know, the same political party with the governor, then he stands the risk of being impeached. That gives you an idea that these guys who occupy these political positions are not interested at all in delivering the dividends of democracy. They are not interested in checking the executive to ensure that the executive is up to speed as far as the promises that this government, you know, has said they are going to carry out for their people. What is happening in Ondo State does not also speak well about our democracy. Unfortunately, the governor of Ondo State is not just a lawyer, but the former, you know, president of the Nigerian Bar Association. And I do not expect that such kind of political ecology should characterize Ondo State, knowing the pedigree and the history of the current governor. I think that he's dragging the name of the Nigerian Bar Association into the mud, and he needs to retrace his steps. And of course, the Ondo State House of Assembly has not also, you know, been playing their role as the legislature. Rather than checking the executive, they are busy, you know, turning themselves into instruments in the hands of the executive arm of government.
But isn't that what they're fighting against, though? Isn't that what the deputy speaker is saying? Isn't that what he's saying, that he does not want to be an instrument, which is why he is standing against? There are about 26 of them. 9 have said, we're not going to do this. We're not going to be instruments. Isn't that why he is speaking out with regards to what you're saying about the State House of Assembly becoming instruments for the government in Ondo State?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's what he's saying. You see, it is difficult in a country like ours to speak truth to power. Power is such that those who occupy do not want to be told the truth. They do not want to be assessed. They do not want to be criticized. They do not want to be criticized no matter how positive these criticisms are, because they feel that once they're in that position, they are lords of the ring, and so nobody should talk to them. And of course, if you speak to power, there are consequences that also come with that, especially from a country like Nigeria, where the truth is always bitter. What is happening to the deputy speaker is because he said the truth, he spoke to power, and of course, he's bearing the consequences of speaking to power. But as Nigerians, we must not get deterred from speaking the truth to power. It is only when we do that that people who occupy political positions will sit up and do the right thing. But like we saw the whole saga, eventually I am confident that the impeachment process will not work out because, number one, they've not been able to meet up with the requirements of Section 188, subsection 5 of the 1999 Constitution as amended. There's even a case before the court because the deputy governor himself has gone to court trying to stall the impeachment process. And so continuing the impeachment process will be termed as sub judice. And so I think this is one exercise in futility as far as I'm concerned.
Dr. Sunday, I wonder if we could focus on like the crux of this case, the fact that the people of Ondo State voted for their governor and of course his vice governor, the vice governor, on the same ticket. So after that process, and these people, let us not forget that these two gentlemen, or at least the governor, is definitely an elected official. Is there any precedent of a deputy and a governor fighting for on different platforms, wanting to associate themselves with different political parties? Has that ever happened before? And how feasible? You've already noted that the deputy governor's camp has already run to court to try and stall this process of getting him out. But I just wonder how, just if we're looking at the law, the application of the law, how simple is this process? How often have we seen instances where you have a governor and a deputy governor say that they no longer represent the same party, and then about the governor wanting to get rid of his deputy? How feasible is this entire process? Because it's just very confusing.
Well, I've not seen a situation where we have a governor and a deputy governor within different political party and eventually both becoming contestants. But of course, you see, history is usually made. And we have similar situation that would have played out in Kogi State when the former deputy governor of Kogi State brought up a series of allegations against Yahaya Bello. And of course, we saw how himself was also impeached because Yahaya Bello utilized the instrumentality, of the State House of Assembly, and he was impeached. But eventually, he got victory in court, and the court said he should be paid all his salaries for all the months he was impeached and for all the months he was not paid. But you see, there's a lot of ambiguity within the Constitution. However, whether or not two persons became governor and deputy governor on the same political platform does not change the fact that every Nigerian has the right to association. So at a point in time, I could choose to change from the political parties I belong to if I feel that the political party is no longer in line with the principles and ideologies as far as governance is concerned that I believe in. And so I don't think it's something strange, but it is a welcome development as far as our political system is concerned. And let's see how it plays out at the field. I expect that the deputy governor, having worked with the governor for this number of years, should be able to tell the people of Ondo State areas that the governor did not do well and why, if he becomes the governor, he will do better.
All right, now speaking of the people of Ondo State, because at the end of the day, those are the ones that matter. It's all about the people. We're forgetting what democracy is. It is government by the people, of the people, for the people. The people are our focus here. So the people of Ondo State recently came out to protest the indirect elections that the caretaker committee insisted is going to be the nature of the primaries that's going to happen. Apart from the people coming out to speak against this nature, the indirect elections, 11 out of the 12 people contesting for this position, this governorship ticket, have also said this indirect election process is really not ideal. So on your, as an analyst, do you think like there actual fears with regards to this fear of somebody trying to go behind closed doors, an unfair election per se? What do you think about that?
Well, I think it is because those 9 persons who are not in support of indirect election is because they are entertaining fears. The truth is that the indirect election system, if you look at the history of party politics and party primaries in Nigeria, is such that it has been characterized by one form of political manipulations or the other. Our delegates are usually sometimes harbored in some hotel rooms. They are bought, and it's usually an opportunity for delegates to make their own, to make their own money as far as the electoral process is concerned. And so the indirect election has tendencies of being easily rigged compared to the direct election. Yeah. And that is the fears that the other factions are entertaining, that if you allow the indirect election to take place, then there's a tendency that the process will be hijacked by those who have the political power, by those who are already, in position of authority.
If we were to sidestep onto take a closer look at Edo state politics, goodness gracious, all of these different states, all their different political worries happening. We know that ahead of Edo state elections there have also been a seeming war of words between two governors who aren't from Edo. You've got Nice and Wike of River State, and obviously Governor Ganduje of Kano, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And they've both had their fair share of words to say on this topic of what's going on in Edo State. What do you think? I mean, we've spoken at length about Oshiomhole. That almost feels like old news now, funnily enough, Oshiomhole and Obaseki. But as it stands now, what do you think the state of this primary election is? Are we finally seeing some type of light at the end of the tunnel where we can anticipate a peaceful transition of power at that primary election? At that state election, rather.
You see, what is playing out in Edo State is what I would call a manifestation of the political good, the bad, and the ugly. We have seen a situation where the political class in Edo State have been inconsistent in their words. They talk from two sides of their mouth. Today you say this person is a devil, this person has done this, has done that. Tomorrow the same persons you have criticized, the same person you have demonized, you rebaptize the person and call the person a saint. Our political class are not consistent in what they say, and so Nigerians are finding it difficult to even believe in those who handle position of authority. We could recall what transpired between Oshiomhole and Pastor Ezeyamu, and what is now transpired between Oshiomhole and Ezeyamu. Now Ezeyamu has become a saint. Before now he was not a saint. Now he has been baptized. He's now a new creature, so he's a saint and is the right guy to handle the seats for as far as the APC is concerned. All these Nigerians are watching. The younger generations are taking a cue from what is going on and what our elders are displaying. What kind of political orientation, what kind of political socialization, what kind of political culture are we transmitting to the younger generation? We are playing dirty politics, politics of inconsistency, politics of primordialism, and all of that. It does not help. Okay, but looking at what is transpiring between Ganduje and Governor Nyesom Wike, it also reflects the typical political idiosyncrasy of the political class, where power is seen as a do-or-die affair. For heaven's sake, you want to become governor, allow the people to have their way. But what we have most times in Nigeria is a situation of imposition, and that is what is leading to the conflict between Nyesom Wike and Ganduje. Ganduje saying that they are going to isolate Nyesom Wike, Nyesom Wike saying that they are going to eat his dollars, and all manner of those things that it doesn't befit people who occupy such lofty political positions, and it's not good for our system. It also tells you that because Ganduje is the chairman of the council responsible for conducting, helping APC to ensure that Ezeyamu becomes the next governor of Edo State, and Nyesom Wike is also responsible for helping ensuring that PDP produce the next governor of Edo State, and this has brought about the clash of words. But like I said, it's like washing our dirty linen in the public, and it's not good for our democracy.
Certainly not good for our democracy at all. Well, right now we have to head out to a quick break, but do stay with us. When we get back to the morning show, we'll still be discussing several issues. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Just before we went on that quick break, We were speaking to lecturer and public affairs analyst Dr. Sunday Adejho on several issues happening within Nigeria. Thanks for staying with us. Now, Dr. Sunday, let's move on to something else that's happening. Now, this week, we saw about 356 members of the Nigerian army opting out over a loss of interest in the midst of, the moral crisis within the service. Within the week as well, the Chief of Army Staff Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai said and reiterated the fact that, listen, the Nigerian army is winning the insurgency fight and they're just so committed. Now, I have to say this. This is not a media attack on the efforts of the Nigerian army in fighting insurgency within Nigeria. But I have to be honest, a lot of people are very worried as to the amount of officers losing interest. Should we be?
Well, I think the effort of the Nigerian military in combating terrorism is highly commendable. I must say that they have made remarkable efforts in combating terrorism in northeastern part of Nigeria. And of course, that the Nigerian military is getting to a point where they are even overwhelmed because the Nigerian military is gradually taking the responsibility of the Nigerian police. The failure of the Nigerian police and Nigeria's policing system has brought about an increase in responsibility for the Nigerian army. The Nigerian army is in charge of counter-insurgency operation. The Nigerian army are the ones also combating banditry in northwestern part of Nigeria, in Zamfara, in Katsina, in Kaduna, and in several parts of Nigeria. The Nigerian military are the ones combating farmers' herders conflict and all of that. This is not the responsibility of the Nigerian army. These are internal security matters, and it's the responsibility of the Nigerian police to ensure that, they own up to their responsibility rather than, overstretching the Nigerian military. But having said that, I am not convinced that the Nigerian military is winning the war against insurgency. And no doubt they have made remarkable efforts. If not for the Nigerian military, Nigeria will not be where it is today. I give credence to the Nigerian military, but that notwithstanding, as far as winning the war is concerned, I do not think that we have won the war. There's a lot of war still left to be fought. And there are several reasons why we are not winning the war. The reason is not solely tied to the Nigerian army. Counter-insurgency operations must be approached from a holistic dimension. What the Nigerian military is doing is the military approach component of counter-insurgency. What of the ideological components? What of the soft power component to countering insurgency? I am not seeing all of that taking place. How comes with all the number of terrorists that have been decimated, with all the number of terrorists that have been killed by the Nigerian army, you still as though nothing has happened? It is because the issue of recruitment into Boko Haram has not been addressed. And it is not the responsibility of the Nigerian army to curtail or control the issue of recruitment. There must be a synergy between the various organs of government as far as this is concerned. What is the National Orientation Agency doing as far as de-radicalization, as far as purging people, as far as discouraging people, as far as showing to people that these terrorists are enemies of the state? What are the Islamic authorities doing as far as preaching to people that the teachings and philosophies of the terrorists is antithetical to the teachings of Islam? We are not seeing all of this. And so every attention is on the Nigerian military, and it's not supposed to be so. Unfortunately, we have a counter-insurgency strategy and a national security policy that, for me, looks like a textbook. It's a textbook because it does not show the steps, the procedures through which this policy can be translated into reality. And that is why we are not making any success. There is there's a non-traditional approach to insecurity. We must begin to look at insecurity in terms of the humanistic aspect of security. When the degree of poverty is high, when the degree of illiteracy is high, when the degree of unemployment is high, these are already conducive atmosphere to increase recruits into terrorist organization and even banditry. Is it the Nigerian military that will be that will ensure that poverty is eradicated? Is it the Nigerian military that will ensure that unemployment is eradicated? Is it the Nigerian military that will ensure that inequality is eradicated? All these are conducive factors that can continue to, increase the rate of terrorism in Nigeria. And government must sit up and ensure that these remote and immediate causes of insurgency is addressed. Until we do that, we will continue to fight this war. Unfortunately, even the multinational joint task force is not doing as much as they ought to do, because I expect that with some degree of military alliance and collaboration within the Lake Chad Basin, I do not expect that we should be talking about Boko Haram up till now. An insurgency that erupted in 2009, and we're in 2020. We're still grappling with such challenge to the point that we have lost a lot of our men and officers have died in the course of counterinsurgency. And that informs the reason why, of course, morale will be low, morale will be down, when you see that a lot of military personnel are being killed by the terrorists. And I must also say that one challenge we have had also is the issue of coordination. I have not seen the expected coordination and collaboration between the Nigerian army and the Nigerian Air Force. For God's sake, the territory within which these guys operate is massive, and so it is difficult for these soldiers to be where they are in a particular location and be able to tell the location of the enemy. But with the Air Force, we can track the movement, we can trace the activities and locations of these guys. But that we are not seeing. And we have also not been able to employ science and technology in counterinsurgency. I've said this time without number that the fight against insurgency will not be successful until we go scientific and technological. If not, we will continue to operate the traditional approach of countering insurgency.
Very, very good. I love that.
Yeah.
That we need to adopt and look at holistic approaches to tackling this insurgency problem.